Hi, this is Michael Shelley, and my favorite things are NRBQ and eating food when I'm driving around or visiting a city, and Ernie Bishmiller's comic strip Nancy.
Welcome to the Finding Favorites podcast, where we explore your favorite things without using an algorithm. Here's your host, Leah Jones.
Hello and welcome to Finding Favorites. Technically, it's Monday, January 16th, but the records may show that it's Sunday, January 15th, depending on how I upload this week's episode. I spent the weekend with my family. We went to the Blackhawks versus Kraken game on Saturday night and watched the Blackhawks get destroyed by the Kraken. Didn't stop it from being a great night at the United Center. And then yesterday we went ice skating at the Maggie Daly Ribbon in Millennial Park, which is so fun. We were there from the minute the gates opened. We had 11 a.m. reservations. We got there early, and we were there until the Zamboni did its first pass of the ribbon after. So we skated for 2 hours. And by we skated, I mean my sister and I watched the jackets, shoes, and snack situation on a bench by the gate. And our nephews and friends spent 2 hours ice skating, which was really lovely. I definitely recommend make reservations and get there before the gates open so that your skates are on and you're ready to hit the ice as soon as they open for your 2-hour window. This week, I am talking to music maker, and DJ Michael Shelley. I saw Michael perform in 1999. He opened for They Might Be Giants on campus at Millikan. I had his CD, Too Many Movies then. I have listened to it off and on over the last 20 odd years. And we follow each other on Twitter. And I reached out and I said, hey, want to come on the podcast? And he said yes. And so I'm talking this week with Michael Shelley. In the interim, since we talked, he sent me a care package. And I got to say, getting a care package from a DJ is always a blast. Couple copies of... I've got his music, and his daughter's. His daughter, Juniper, has a new CD out called She Steals Candy. It is available now. I'll link to it. And her self-titled debut, Juniper. And then he sent me a copy of Michael Shelley, I Blame You, Michael Shelley, Goodbye Cheater. I already had Too Many Movies. And then also Michael is a DJ at WFMU, which is an independent radio station in New York and New Jersey. And he sent me a few CDs made as prizes for fundraising marathons to support the radio station. So I'm excited to have some new music to listen to in my car, which is where my main CD player access is. So Michael and I have a really fun time talking about music, comics, food, road trips. It's a pretty wide conversation. It's really lovely. He's on every Saturday morning on WFMU, but all of his interviews and shows are also archived. So if you like Michael's introduction to NRBQ, then go and listen to some of his archives and see what other music he can introduce you to. So with that, wear your mask, wash your hands, get that bivalent booster, and keep enjoying your favorite things. Hello and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones, and this is the podcast where we learn about people's favorite things and get recommendations without using an algorithm. I am joined today by Michael Shelley. He is a DJ on WFMU, which is an independent freeform radio station broadcasting at 91.1 and 91.9 FM in New Jersey and New York. It's also available online. Michael is a musician and a father. And Michael, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. It's fun. I can't wait to do this. I'm excited.
So I don't know if you will remember why I originally followed you on Twitter, which is that I saw you open for They Might Be Giants in 1999.
Wow,
I believe.
where? No, it's so funny. I have no memory of where was it? What venue?
At Millikan University in Decatur, Illinois. I think I saw you perform in the 90s. I bought your CD and listened to it for the last 25 years.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not what we're talking about today, but that's a band that I went to go see before I ever made a record. I was a fan of that band, and then so for me, they somehow got a copy of my second record. I think our mutual friend Laura Cantrell gave them a copy, and the next thing I know, they invited me to go on tour with them, and it was the most fun thing I ever did in my life. Period. And
Yeah.
I'm so glad that there's still some people like you that I'm still connected with through that event.
Yeah, I was listening to it a few years ago, just because sometimes, so it's the CD Too Many Movies, and just every once in a while I get an earworm, so I need to put it on. And I was like, I wonder what he's up to. Is he still doing music? And then I found you on Twitter and I followed you, and that is how I know who you are.
Well, that's interesting. Well, I will say, just as a plug to you and maybe everybody, or cut this out, that tomorrow a new CD from my daughter, who just turned 18 last week, comes out, and it's kind of this is the second record I've made with her, and it sort of is the way it seems like right now I'm making music is through her. So we kind of work on this together, and there's some of my songs, and we work together and we cover people that we love, and it's so the music continues, but it's kind of now sort of through a different channel.
That's great. Where can people find this CD or stream it?
It's everywhere you can stream anything. Her website is junipersongs.com.
Great. Well, we'll make sure we link to that in the show notes so people can get on board.
Yeah, it's fun.
Tell me a little bit about WFMU.
WFMU is the United States' longest running freeform radio station, and it's a very, very unusual place. All the DJs sort of do whatever they want to do, and I think some people think of WFMU as a station that, when you turn it on, sounds like a vacuum cleaner, a broken vacuum cleaner, that it's not music, it's some experiment. And there are people that play 3 hours of stuff that sounds like that, but it kind of really goes... There's a huge range, and again, it's something that I've been there now. I did my first show in 1992 there, and I took some time off to play music and stuff, but I've always come back, and I've been now on Saturday mornings for about 10 years, and it's just a great community. There's some really, really smart people, some really knowledgeable people, some really interesting people, and for me, I find the more you listen, the more open-minded you get, and the more willing you are to sort of take a left turn once in a while. So it's something I highly recommend. If you love music and you're open-minded, you should check out WFMU.
Do you still go into the studio for that, play CDs, or do people... Is DJing from home a thing that happens?
Well, during the lockdown, we did all DJ from home. In fact, we got some sort of a grant, and people got equipment, and I have a recording studio in my basement, so I kind of had almost everything I needed, but but everybody got microphones and headphones and mixers, and very, very quickly we figured out how to broadcast from home. So for, I don't know, I guess about a year, we all broadcasted from home, which was so fun to be in your pajamas, eating a homemade corn muffin and doing your radio show. But yes, I still go in, we're back live in person in Jersey City every Saturday morning.
Oh, that's very cool. It sounds to me like college radio in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, there is something similar to that each DJ is playing whatever they want, and the station doesn't give you any directives. And there's a lot of people who've been on the air a very long time, and there's new people coming all the time, and it's very exciting. I mean, it's a really unique situation.
Cool. Thanks I listened to one of your end of December broadcasts over the last week. So I had a sense for at least what you were playing that week. but I hadn't listened to other shows yet.
Well, because this is a podcast about things people love, my radio show is really about me almost evangelizing about songs, about music, things that I love and that I want to spread that. And it's interesting because my show evolved. It used to be sort of a typical show where I'd play 5 or 6 songs, then I'd back announce them, so forth and so forth. And it kind of, I sort of thought, well, what if you presented sort of non-commercial music, but you did it in a more fun way? And then what people really reacted to was the personal connection I gave to some of the songs. And so that sort of became what the show was about. And it really is about me almost trying to trick you into liking these weird songs.
How do you find new to you music?
It's interesting. A lot of it comes to you. A lot of people knock on your door when you do a radio show, and then I do stuff like check out Bandcamp, simple like that. And then at WFMU every week, there's what we call the new bin, where there's hundreds of CDs and more LPs lately. And I get there early on Saturday morning and I just listen to a bunch of them. And also listeners will say, you like this, I think you'll like this. It's like that, like you say, it's the actual brain algorithm, the actual person who says, oh, you like this, you should check this out. And that's, there's no better connection than that.
Yeah. That's great. That's really... so much in Chicago, we have Chirp. Chirp is a maybe 10 or 15-year-old radio station in Chicago. But other than that, almost all of it is conglomerate owned, nationally programmed. So it's interesting to find where are the pockets of radio that are still really being run by people. And there aren't many.
You mentioned back in the 90s and the They Might Be Giants time. That was a time when there was this network of zines and small, every town had their own sort of free newspaper that had the band who was coming through town on the cover. And there were record stores that didn't have a buyer and, buying for the whole chain. Each guy was buying their own store and venues, and these things all work together. Radio programmed locally to help break bands and to help make a scene, and I do think some of that has disappeared, and it's too bad.
So I asked you to come on and you shared with me a lot of things that are your favorites. But what if we start with NRBQ, since they are a band?
Well, NRBQ is an incredible band. I mean, I often say they're my favorite band who isn't the Beatles or the Beach Boys, because that's sort of a different league. And interestingly, I have seen NRBQ twice open for They Might Be Giants. They are clearly, John and John are clearly huge fans of them. In fact, once in the 90s, They Might Be Giants were sound checking, and they would just say, Michael, pick a song. And I said, oh, do an NRBQ song. And they immediately started doing an NRBQ song. So they're a fantastic band. They've been around since the late 60s. I think their first album is 1968 or 69, and they still exist today. And 2 of the members are guys who live in Chicago, and they are there's only one original member left, but they're still maybe one of the greatest. They are one of the greatest bands in America right now, this minute, and they do something that is so rare, is that they're a great live band. Each guy in the band is an expert. Is not just an expert, but plays their instrument in a really unique way. Mm-hmm. And then there's this chemistry that when they get together, that equals something more than 100%. So they're a great live band. They all write great songs. There's more than one singer, more than one songwriter. And then they also make incredible pop records. So it's just this incredible combination that's very, very rare. And they are very much a free-form band. They will take anything that any musical influence and turn it into this sort of through the NRBQ machine into pop music. There's not too many bands I recommend you go see live, even if you've never heard a note of their music. NRBQ is definitely one.
Do you remember your first encounter with them?
I'd always heard about them. Again, it's funny when you don't hear a band on the radio when you are growing up, and especially in the olden days when there was no internet or so, there was no way to just hear what you wanted to hear. You either had to be handed a record, and there were definitely records in high school that people handed me, or my brother turned me on to, or people, made the connection. But NRBQ was not, I never really heard of them until I was in my 20s, and I was at a used record store, and I remember the first record I bought by them was their Christmas record, which is maybe not the best place to start. And then, I went and saw them once, and they just kind of blew my mind, and then I just started buying, then I just got deeper and deeper into them. And, there's sort of there was a lineup of NRBQ that existed probably from the mid 70s to the early 90s that some people call the classic lineup of NRBQ. But there have been many lineups, and they've really all had their incredibleness about them. Just an amazing band. They're often talked about. I'm sorry to keep talking about this.
Keep talking. That's the point. Yeah.
Okay. They're a band. They're sometimes described as a musician's band, a band's band, because, and it's true, when you go see them, you see a lot of kind of well-known people in bands in the audience, because they're a magical band.
And you've seen them twice.
Oh, I've seen them 100 times. No, I just saw them with
twice.
No, I saw them with They Might Be Giants twice.
Oh, with They Might Be Giants. Okay.
Just to connect all the dots. Yeah, I've seen this band maybe more times than any band I've ever seen, because they're very easy to see, and they're very easy to see, especially in the East Coast of the United States of America. They tour a lot. I mean, maybe not as much as they did it in their heyday, but yes, they're just they're a great band to see. Yeah, I'll drive around to see them. I will see them many nights in a row, and it's a different show every night. They never use a set list. They're different.
Do you have a favorite type of venue? Do you like to see them at are they an outdoor festival band for you? Are they a small intimate venue? Do they have a dance floor going? Is it like let's sit down and appreciate the music? Like, what is your ideal venue?
That's a good question. No band is an outdoor festival band for me. I mean, that is to me a nightmare. Put your shirt back on, and I'm not interested. This is like,
I agree.
I want to go see bands. It's tough because I recognize music is fun and going out is fun, but it also doesn't mean you should talk through the whole performance, or to me, what's acceptable is you can lean over and say they're really good tonight, or what album is this on? But that's about it. And so I can get really cranky. So I like any band with any venue with great sound where I can see. I generally like to sit these days, but I don't mind standing. So, there is something wonderful about Saturday night at midnight, and you've been standing 12 feet center from the stage because you want that vantage point for 4 hours, and the band comes out, and all of the pain in your leg goes away because the band you're dying to see is right there on stage.
Yeah, I agree with you about outdoor festivals. I live in Chicago, which has become the permanent home of Lollapalooza, and I didn't go. I went to Warped once in the 90s. I never went to Lolla when it was traveling. And it has just become truly my nightmare. Like if somebody was going to torture me and put me in my own personal bad place, it would be to send me to Lollapalooza in 2023.
Yeah. Well, it's just not about the music. So it's a different experience. It's for people who want to go do that thing.
Yeah. I did I just went to my first concert in the Kennedy Center at the Kennedy Center in DC. I saw Weird Al on his most recent tour, so last month, and that was phenomenal. I'd never been in that space before, and I do want to sit. I can't survive standing through a show anymore, which is probably why I don't see as much live music anymore. Is figuring out what's the venue that is going to have chairs out, or at least some chairs out, or some tall stools in the back for me.
Yeah, I'm 100. Yeah, something to lean against. I do often bring a big pocket of ibuprofen to a show nowadays. I just know I'm gonna need it. But that's the bargain.
So if you were going to program a Saturday morning around this band for people who have never listened before, now it sounds like starting with the Christmas album, not the place to start.
Well, it's not. Yeah, it's not really very indicative of their catalog as a whole. There are a few of their albums that I would urge people to start with. At Yankee Stadium is one. Tiddlywinks is one, and I know that they're actually reissuing that record this week or next week. Scraps is one. All Hopped Up is one. I mean, every one of those is a gem. I mean, you could really almost start anywhere, but that sort of mid-period is a great place to start. Yeah, fantastic band.
Nice. Yeah, they have, I opened up their Wikipedia, and it is a tremendous amount of albums. 20, 25 studio albums, 10 or 15 live albums, compilations, singles. It's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah, it is. Yeah, but trust me, once you get in, don't buy greatest hits because you'll just end up buying all the albums anyway, and it will be redundant.
Were you at any of these shows that have gone on to become live albums?
Oh, that's interesting. Actually, there is one live album which they recorded at WFMU has a venue on their first floor called Monty Hall because it's on Montgomery Street. And they did end up putting out a live DVD and album of a show they did there. And I was definitely in the audience for that. Nice.
When they are performing, do they have opening bands? Have you found other bands through them?
It's interesting. That's a very particularly interesting question in relation to NRBQ because most often they don't have opening bands, and more than most bands, when they do have an opening band, it doesn't work. Generally, they'll play a very long set, and they don't really need an opening band, and I think they're best when they don't have an opening band. And for some reason, people who book them just don't seem to really have a great handle on what type of band to put before them, unless it's some sort of known quantity. But the last time I saw them, they just had the strangest mismatch of opening band. But yeah, no, I've never been turned on to an opening band that I didn't already know. And I'm a type of person who always gets to the venue early, always wants to see the opening band, always wants to get turned on to something new.
Yeah. Great. I will give them a listen. I'll try to listen before the episode comes out on Sunday so that I can say something interesting or smart about them.
If you like They Might Be Giants, you should like them. They are the broadest definition of pop music. There's a little of everything in there, and it's very original. It's very hard to describe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you'll like them. If you like me, if you like my records, I steal from NRBQ, so perfect.
Outstanding. So other items on the list, you've got Nick Lowe, Eating Food While Traveling, the comic strip Nancy, the Our Gang comedies, Talking to Strangers. Which of those, or is there something else that now that we've been talking about NRBQ that you think is an interesting next place to head?
Well, I would guess not Nick Lowe, just because that's another musician. So you just hear me talking about how great I think Nick Lowe
Another
is,
musician is.
that I've seen a million times, and who I've stolen from. Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. It's sort of up to you, I guess. And if it sucks, we can just move on to the next down the list or whatever.
Let's talk about the comic strip Nancy. I'm gonna Google it quickly because I think I know who Nancy is. Yes, I do.
Well, sometimes people think that, there's a joke that Nancy looks like it was drawn with a rubber stamp because, she just always looks so iconic. She's, Nancy was originally drawn by this guy named Ernie Bush Miller, and Nancy still exists now. And to my point of view, it's horrible. It's not. Once Ernie Bush Miller died, a few other people have drawn Nancy since then, and it's terrible now. It's just it's a disaster. But what I love is the original Ernie Bush Miller Nancy, and he drew it for like 40 years or something. Mm-hmm. And when I was a kid, it was just in the daily newspaper that was delivered to our house every day. And it's now sort of become sort of a slightly, I don't know, hip type of signifier. People like to a lot of artists reuse images of Nancy, and some people I think like Nancy for the wrong reasons. But the reason I love Nancy is because I think it's genius. It's just funny and visually beautiful, and I really think Ernie Bush Miller was a straight up genius.
Yeah. So Nancy wasn't in our comic pages growing up. So it's funny, like I read the name, I had an image in my head, I Googled her, knew right away that was it. But I don't actually know where I came across it if it wasn't, because it was not, and I read the comic pages daily and Sundays, spent a lot of time with it. So I don't know where I would have come across Nancy.
It's interesting. Some things are bigger than there's songs that I know I've never listened to, but somehow I know, they just seep into the cracks of yourself. Maybe T-shirts or, just bands using Nancy for people posting it on Facebook or whatever. There is a sort of a second life to Nancy and stuff, and all the stuff, not all the stuff, but many of the Prime stuff. Fantagraphics reissued 3 books that are just all, the daily strips for like 15 years in a row. And I remember seeing my daughter at age 8 or 9, reading one of those books and laughing out loud and, being hooked on it. And it's just, they're great stuff. And luckily a lot of it has been reissued. You can check out that old stuff if you're want to search for it.
Yeah. So it sounds like you have some compilation books for Nancy.
I do have a ton of those, and I have some old comic books also, but you have to be careful with the old comic books because some of them are not written by Ernie Bush Miller. They're just sort of like exploitation comic books or something.
Oh. I thought you were going to say just because the paper is fragile.
No. Well, they're expensive, but just some of them are, kind of just cash in on the Nancy craze, I guess, of the 50s or whatever.
So what is it about them that has kept you coming back?
Oh, like I said, it's just that they're as funny as anything. I guess it's maybe that the sense of humor of Ernie Bush Miller really is a good match for me. What he finds funny about the world, I find funny about the world, and the way that he sets up a joke and presents a joke is a real bullseye for me. It's he's kind of clever and wry, but the jokes are simple and clean and very easy to understand. He's got an amazing visual style. It's just very, very unique. It's just, to me, it's, easy to appreciate. I mean, I think, like some, there are times when you find something in your life that speaks to you, that speaks to the way you see the world. And there's other times when there's hugely popular things that you just don't get at all. And for me, that often comes down to I just don't get the way it's presented. It just doesn't seem real to me, and so I can't connect to it, and so I really value something that, when I just feel a connection to the point of view of something.
Yeah. It says, it says on the Wikipedia that Bushmiller introduced Nancy in 1933 and intended to keep the character for a week and then dump her. But the little Dickens was soon stealing the show, and Bushmiller the ingrate was taking all the bows. So he had meant for her to be a week-long character, and I guess he also found his voice with her.
He was writing this comic strip about Nancy's niece, Aunt Fritz, and she was kind of a flapper type of single girl, a little bit, not a dingbat exactly, but, a single struggling show business person, maybe, and yes, her niece Nancy came to visit for a week and never left, and never grew up. She stayed age whatever she is for 40 years,
Yeah, well, as all good comic children do, right? The Snoopy kids haven't grown up. The Garfield has lived 81 of his 9 lives.
Right, the Simpsons would be in their 50s now or whatever.
Yeah, right. And how did you introduce your daughter to the Nancy comics? Was it, these are books that are just available on the bookshelf and she found her way to them? Or was there a point where you're like, and now I'm going to let you read my favorite comic?
No, I think she just found them. I think I was probably reading them and she just said, that looks like something I could and should read. And, you can, it doesn't take long before you're hooked, And he did a very interesting thing, like many daily strips, in that he would, for a week or 2 weeks or a month, there would sort of be a theme. Nancy's having trouble with her neighbor, or Nancy and Sluggo are trying to make money different ways. So each day there's a joke, but there was, the circus is in town for a week. So all 5 strips that week are going to have something to do with the circus, or, and so there's enough of a plot to sort of keep you in, which I think is smart.
Yeah. And have you ever been tempted by art or t-shirts or like the Nancy, I was about to say propaganda, which is the wrong word.
Memorabilia?
Merchandise.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you that my house is a minor Nancy museum. There's some Nancy folk art, which there's a few amazing pieces that I found. There's a bunch of different dolls, plastic ones and rubber ones and cloth ones. There's a music box. There's toys, there's dolls where you pull a string, there's jigsaw puzzles, there's coloring books, there's activity books. Nancy was well merchandised, and we have a decent amount of it. I mean, most of it luckily was purchased before prices of stuff like that exploded. I've had it kind of for a while, but and some old paperback books that were published, back when they were, contemporary, that I found, in thrift shops over the years or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, she was Bushmiller wrote her from 2019 for 60 years. No, 60 years, 1922 to 1982.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's tremendous.
Every day, come up with a new joke every day. Wow.
Right. And it was in 880 newspapers.
I think you'll find a little bit like NRBQ that all the people who like Nancy and Sluggo are smart people. Are creative geniuses. I don't know. There's something that there is a sort of a Nancy club. If you like Nancy, then you're okay with me.
Yeah. I wonder what it was about the Tribune Star that said no Nancy for Terre Haute, Indiana.
I'm sorry, Leah. Your childhood was ruined. Yeah.
I know. Just Garfield, Snoopy, the kids that were always following the map and going into, they weren't following a map. The gag was they drew like the dotted line based on where all the kids went.
Family
when
circus.
They didn't go directly. Yes, Family Circus. Yeah. Are there any Nancy items that you are still hunting for, or that you've seen and they're now overpriced and you wish you'd gotten to sooner?
Not really. No, also just I'm at a point in my life maybe where I'm ready to divest more than to acquire, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But no, I'm also sort of like I have a fairly large record collection, but they almost were all purchased for $1 or $2 or $3. I don't have a collection of very expensive records. I'm much more of a guy who's, in the Salvation Army, or if I go to a record show, I'm on the floor looking at the records nobody else wants, getting kicked in the head sort of by the real collectors.
I talked to Kevin Smokler about how he became a vinyl collector, but just talking about using before vinyl got so expensive when you could really give yourself an affordable music education by shopping those $1 bins.
I definitely think that records sound really good. I do believe that. I think good, well-made CDs sound really good too, though. And I am one of those people who just wants to have the song, and I don't need to have the original pressing. Oh, hi Kitty.
That's Cowboy.
Hi, Cowboy. Special guest.
Yep.
So yeah, it's not important to me to have an original LP. I'm happy to just have an MP3 if that's the best I can get.
Yeah.
And I got a daughter to put through college soon, so.
Right. Well, maybe she can have a Nancy funded scholarship.
Yeah, about 10 minutes worth of college. Yeah.
No. Let's talk about eating while you're on the road. Eating food while traveling.
That is such an important topic to talk about. This sort of started a little bit relating to music. And when I was 23 or so, I was living in Los Angeles, and I was playing softball with a bunch of musician people that worked in record stores and radio stations and journalists and guys in bands, and it was a terrific, fun game. And I met a lot of people that I'm still really close friends with. And this was quite a while ago. And one of these guys was in a band, and that band, long story short, got signed to a record deal. And they said, "How would you like to be our sound man and go on the road?" And I said, "Sure, okay, and I didn't really know how to do that, but I figured it out." And I had never traveled too much around the United States of America. And so this was 1987, 88, something like that. And it is that time we were talking about earlier when there was booming college radio and indie music press and lots of little clubs to play. And so that band, so I got in a van and for a year drove all around and saw all of America and saw lots of college campuses. And one of the things they had was this book by Jane and Michael Stern called Road Food. And it listed by state and by region. Their original idea, they originally wrote two books, one called Good Food and one called Road Food. And Road Food was really about food that truckers liked, food that had to be 5 miles or less from the interchange. And then Good Food was about regional food. And they sort of combined these books and put out, and this is like a 4-inch thick book. And we would, you're driving 400 miles a day or whatever, and you're cold and you're all sleep. We would all sleep in one hotel room. We would sneak in and sleep on the floor, and you had no money, and et cetera, et cetera. And so you would really look forward to whatever the meal was. And I ate, my mother did not cook anything particularly exotic, and we didn't, there were no barbecue restaurants or New Orleans restaurants or whatever. So it was just really important to learn to find that place, or otherwise you're eating at, the Denny's, which is fine, but you just don't want to do that too many times if you're out on the road for that long. And so by the time I was touring, again, we would, that was a huge, huge thing to place a lot of importance on, was finding the regional best thing to eat. And when my wife and I got married, we drove across country for 5 weeks for our honeymoon, and we averaged over one restaurant per day out of the road food books. Because by the time we got married, there was like 20 editions of these books. And now, of course, there's a website, I think it's roadfood.com, and you can search all these restaurants, by state or whatever. And there's lots of other resources for that kind of thing. But, we sometimes it's just a piece of pie somewhere. But to average more than one per day for 5 weeks is eating an incredible amount of good regional American food. And it's just a great way, even now when I travel anywhere, if I go, we were in London in November, and one of the great things you do is you just pick, well, I want to go to this restaurant and this restaurant, and that kind of, okay, what's near that? It's just, it's a good pin to stick in the map.
Are you, so when you're traveling, you like to read through a guide and plan the day around the food?
Well, that's one of the factors. I mean, there are definitely times when you travel when it's not about food. I love going to Yellowstone Park, one of my favorite places in the world. When you go up there, you don't worry about food or things like that. But yeah, if you are, but it's just what I said before. Is you could be at the Denny's and literally 7 minutes away could be the place that invented the breakfast burrito, and that's and that's going to be something you shouldn't, with just a little bit of scratching the surface, you can find that. And to me, it's so worth doing. And it's a way to see where you are and to get a little bit off the beaten path. It just, food is a great door into what a place is all about.
Yeah, I have, I do love eating when I'm on the road. But I feel like when I'm driving, I am not very adventurous on my road trips. But when I'm traveling somewhere and I don't have a car, I am much more likely to seek out, either I'm traveling with someone who does the research and tells me where we're going to eat. I'll say yes to whatever restaurant my traveling partners have found. Or I'm happy to go and stand in the middle of a plaza and look around, look for the busiest place that doesn't have a line. I don't like waiting in line for food, and find somewhere to eat just by looking at the crowds and who's around.
There's a place in Chicago I went. Now this is a ways back. I was in Chicago for a wedding, and we found this place through the road food book, and it was a sort of mostly a breakfast place. And the owner came out and gave small boxes of Milk Duds to only the females who were waiting online. And they
Milk Duds and donut holes.
Yes, exactly right. And it was fabulous. Maybe Ed somebody, or I can't.
It is. It's on Jackson.
Oh,
it's
still
right
there.
By Union Station. Yes. Yeah, it's one of the very first places. Very first restaurants I went to when I moved to Chicago in 2002. What is it called? It's not the White Palace Grill.
I thought it was guy's name. And they had all these. They had the water kind of going in and out of various fish
Lou
tanks.
Mitchell's.
Lou Mitchell's. There you go.
Lou Mitchell's.
Yeah, Lou Mitchell's. What a great. That's a perfect example of there's only one Lou Mitchell's, and if in Chicago, go eat there.
Yeah, it's outstanding. One of the things we lost during COVID in Chicago, we lost almost anything 24 hours. Almost everything that used to be 24 hours has closed, which meant we lost. There aren't many 24-hour diners left. But Chicago used to be a great city for 24-hour Greek diners, where just any time of day, go and get a skillet, get pancakes. But Lou Mitchell's is an iconic breakfast joint in Chicago.
And the 24-hour thing just hasn't come back. It just
hasn't. It's we had curfews for a while in Chicago, because that was how our mayor was dealing with the Black Lives Matters protests, which were the same summer as the COVID lockdown. Then they tried to tighten up on the liquor laws, and places just didn't recover. And like, we don't have 24-hour grocery stores anymore. We don't have, it's really strange. The whole, Chicago had a really rich, there are 5 a.m. bars in Chicago, which I don't go to anymore because I'm not in that era of my life. But you need 24-hour service when you have a more blue-collar city, when people are working factory jobs and people are working swing shifts. People need to be able to go grocery shopping at the end of their work day, which might be at 3 a.m, or have a beer after their shift. And I don't know if it's part of the gentrification of Chicago, I don't know. I'm sure there's a book or 5 to be written about the changes in Chicago over the last 10 years.
Yeah, I hope stuff like that comes back.
Yeah, I do too. I miss it being an option.
Yeah.
It felt good, even if I wasn't going to, in my 20s, I was managing an ice cream parlor. So we would close at like 11, get out of there at midnight. And one of the guys that I worked with and I were both doing a lot of writing at the time. Now he has since like gone on and sold a number of scripts and is making movies and comic books, and he's really kept the writing going. But we would close the ice cream parlor, walk a quarter of a mile. We had 3 24-hour diners to pick from, half a mile in any direction. And so we would then go and take our notebooks and sit, from midnight till 2 a.m, drinking coffee, writing in our notebooks, plotting our future takeover of Hollywood. And then sometimes I would go to a Kinko's, because I didn't have a computer or a printer at home, to type whatever I had written and print it out so then I could do something with it.
Wow.
And that whole ecosystem is gone now.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I definitely think for me, going to those kind of places, definitely after a concert, everybody just go and, some people just drink coffee or get a cheesecake, or some people are hungry and you're just sitting around a big table talking about the music, and just part of the experience was ending, in a diner.
Yeah. Have you, what are some of the meals that really stand out for you from different road trips and from different, from London or?
Well, one of the things that really stands out is the first time I went to New Orleans, which is when I was 23 and when working with this band, and I just never tasted anything remotely like the food I had on that trip. And I wasn't a squeamish eater or anything, but like I remember going to this restaurant and we had red beans and rice, and there was just something, it was very smoky and very, it just was seasoned in a way I was completely unused to. And, it blew my mind a little bit. I mean, that one particular meal I can absolutely remember. And the first time I ate at Galatoire's in New Orleans was the second thing that just blew my mind. It was... it's funny, as a wedding present, someone gave my wife and I a dinner there, and so we went, and I'd left we'd left our house at like 5 a.m. for our honeymoon, and I forgot to bring the bag with my quote fancy clothes, so I was wearing like Converse and a jacket that we borrowed from the restaurant, which I left a note in saying, "Hey, I had a great meal wearing this jacket. Hope your meal is as good as mine." And and we kind of let the waitress talk us into what to get and walk us through it. And that meal is unforgettable. That's one of the best meals I ever had by far. But sometimes just like and Mexican food in the Southwest, I'd never really had food like that, and chili sauces and stuff like that, mind-blowing. Giant burrito in San Francisco, one of the best things I ever ate. a carnitas burrito at El Armando's in near San Diego. I remember like it was yesterday. I want to cradle it like a baby. So there's, millions of great meals.
Yeah. Where did you grow up?
I was born in New York City and moved to the suburbs to Larchmont, New York, right before second grade. And so went through the rest of school there.
Okay. Like I said, I grew up in Indiana behind a strip of Wabash Avenue in Terre Haute. The strip that I lived behind had every fast food restaurant, every chain available. So just probably grew up with a pretty Midwestern palate. And then I can remember the first time I had sushi in San Francisco, which was a stretch. Now I really like it. And I did like some of what I had that first time I had sushi, but it was really like a stretch by texture and taste. There was a lot happening. But enough by the first time I went to Japan, I was able to have sushi and enjoy it. And that was only maybe 5 or 6 years later. But recently I was in Israel and went to a place called Taizu, where it's a Pan-Asian, I don't know if it has a Michelin star, a Michelin bib restaurant, where you could either order off the menu or the staff could interview you and then just bring you the dinner they see fit. And we did that, where we let them interview us about, and not just what are allergies, what are things you like and dislike, what's on and off the table for you. And the only thing I said that I wouldn't eat was they had some very dramatic whole fried fish. But I feel like I don't know how to eat a whole fried fish. Like, I don't know how to attack it. Like, how? I got a little bit of anxiety around, I couldn't imagine how to eat what I saw people being served. So I was like, that's the only thing I don't want to be served, because I think I'll look dumb eating it, and I'm afraid to ask for help. But anything else, I'll try anything else on the menu.
I've had the whole fried fish in like the Caribbean, places like that, and I always find it a little disappointing in that there's a lot of bones and eyes and skin, and like it always turns out to be like less good part than you think. I'm not afraid of it. It's just like it's kind of more of a show, I think, than it is. At least the times I've had it. So yeah, I usually avoid the whole fried fish. Have you ever been to this or heard of this restaurant called Zahev in Philadelphia?
I've heard of it.
That's one of the best meals I ever had. It's an Israeli place, and they just bring you lots of little bowls, and it's really mind-blowing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a place in Chicago called, is it Faya? Fiya, which is the food of the Levant. They have a coal-fired or wood oven where like all the pita and the chicken's coming out of this wood fire in the middle of the restaurant. And incredible hummus, like I'll get hummus with gribnis, like fried chicken skin on top of it. Phenomenal.
Oh, wow.
And a little bit of lemon curd.
You're blowing my mind a little bit. That's bizarre, but okay, I'm in.
It's so good.
Have you ever been to? I would say Rome is one of my favorite food cities. Like, you can't put a bad mouthful in your mouth. It's just everything is good. And you think like, well, they have the same ingredients we have. Why is it so much better? But everything there was just wonderful.
Yeah, I went to Rome for 24 hours. Not enough time to go to Rome. And the best meal I had while I was there, I was admittedly quite hungover and trying desperately to see the things you're supposed to see when you're in Rome, but also you want to die. And I was with a coworker, and we kind of just followed a group of construction guys to a sausage, like a little sausage joint. And it was sausage that was on the grill, with wilted spinach in a beautiful roll with the coldest Coke I've ever had in my entire life. And it was one of the best meals I had that winter. Yeah. I got to work in London for a winter. And it was this sausage on a roll in Rome.
Wow.
And then I felt fine. It did all the work.
Yeah. There's a reason, those weird food trucks have a line at 4 a.m. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something that Chicago also hasn't. Our city council wrote such restrictive rules around food trucks that even though we have them, we don't have a thriving food truck scene like most major cities do, which is a bummer.
Yeah, I'm not a huge food truck user, but where we live, I live in the suburbs of 14 miles away from Manhattan, so close, but there's not too many food trucks around here.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have some go-to meals in the city in Manhattan?
There's old places I like to go just for sort of old time's sake, but so many of those are disappearing. And more celebratory kind of nice-ish places. But there was, did they do Restaurant Week in Chicago where they have, a meal for $22 or whatever? In the summers, my daughter and I would always go do that and eat in some, ridiculously expensive place. And I always sort of enjoyed that, just a chance to check out some other level of cuisine that you really can't quite afford otherwise.
Yeah. My dad and I, a couple years ago, we went to New York to pick up some of he had some sculptures that we had put into store. He was in a show he had some sculptures in a show. We put them in storage in New York. And so this was the trip to recover the sculptures and bring them back to Indiana. And he had seen a 60 Minutes about the place in New York that I think originated the porterhouse. Something like a 60-day dry-aged porterhouse. And he had seen it on 60 Minutes, and it had been on his list of places to eat. And so a couple years ago, we went there for dinner, and we split a porterhouse and maybe a shrimp cocktail, because you don't need much more because it is such a huge meal. And that was that was phenomenal.
Do you remember what place that was? Was it in Manhattan or Brooklyn?
It was in Manhattan. Let me see. Well, now there's a place called Porterhouse, and that's not helping me.
Delmonico's or Gallagher's or the Old Homestead, or
it might have been Gallagher's. Let's look at pictures
Keen's,
there.
Or
I'm looking at some pictures. It was Gallagher's. Yes.
Yeah,
with that huge vault of beef as you walk in.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
On the sidewalk, you can see all these. Yeah, it's not appetizing for some people. Yeah.
Right. So that's where we went, and it was an amazing meal on a rainy Thursday night in Manhattan.
You're making me hungry.
Well, we're coming around to the end of the hour, so you'll get to either go have dinner or have an after dinner snack. I don't know. Is there anything else about eating while you're on the road to mention before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think that's covered. I think.
Well, Michael, this has been an absolute blast.
Oh, I could talk to you for eternity. Especially because I'm talking about stuff I love. So it's pretty easy to just go on and on and on and on.
Yeah. It has been one of the delights of doing this podcast is that, I think as adults, we get asked about our careers, so we can answer all the job stuff. You might get asked about your love story, but we don't often get a chance to talk about our hobbies or the things that we love. Like, it just doesn't come up much. And so I have really enjoyed the opportunity to have, now 130 conversations like this.
Yeah, it's a great idea, certainly for a podcast. Yeah, to get a conversation flowing naturally that's not just about flogging your new book or your new whatever you're trying to flog. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we should mention on mic that you listened to a little bit of the conversation I had with Mike Sachs about Over the Edge. So Mike Sachs was a guest of mine. He had some books coming out, but we were talking about the movie Over the Edge, one of his favorites. And you actually went on set of Over the Edge.
Yeah, my mother was an actress. Well, she's still an actress. She's 92 now, but and she plays the principal of the school that the kids all blow up or whatever in that movie. And so it filmed during the summertime, so I just went out there and stood around and watched them film that movie for a few weeks. So it's a close, near and dear to my family's heart, that movie.
That's I love it. I love that small world stuff.
And great soundtrack too.
Yeah, I still need to watch the movie. I remember when Mike and I were talking about it, I'm like, I remember seeing it's in there. I remember seeing it on TV. Kind of locked in between all of Summer in One Day, that like half-hour movie or television event, and maybe some horror movies about prom and the girl who killed everybody with the mirror.
Carrie.
It's locked in there. That's where it's locked in the 80s part of my brain. Michael, where can people find you online or catch up with you?
Well, good question. The radio shows are all archived. That's one of the things that makes WFMU very unique is every single show is archived for eternity, and my shows are at wfmu.org/Michael. Very easy to find chronologically there. And the interviews I interview a lot of music makers, and those are podcast without all the rest of the show, just the interview portions. So you can just search for me and wherever you get your podcasts and and you can find my website at what's it called, michaelshelley.net, and that's information more about me and as a music maker. And if you want to, buy a bunch of old CDs and get them out of my basement, that's where to do it. Or just go on Spotify like the rest of the world. And the old records, the ones you bought, Leah, are up on Spotify, and they still do connect with people. And it always surprises me when someone posts something on Facebook who doesn't know me and they post one of my songs, or somebody still once in a while is like, what's the chords to this song? Or like, there's still a little bit of movement in that stuff, and that I find that I love that.
Outstanding. Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining me tonight. This has been wonderful.
Oh, so fun. If I ever get to Chicago, we'll go to Lou Mitchell's and we'll get some milk duds.
Yes, and I will look up the Flat Five.
Sure, it's a deal.
Thank you for listening to Finding Favorites with Leah Jones. Please make sure to subscribe and drop us a 5-star review on iTunes. Now, go out and enjoy your favorite things.